Welcome to John Muir's home and to the John Muir National Historic Site in Martinez. Hello, I'm Doug McConnell with my friends Tom Leatherman, superintendent of this and 3 other national park locations in the East Bay, and Linus Uckel, executive director of the John Muir Land Trust. And the 3 of us are your co-hosts for a big celebration of the expansion of this important national historic site and increased public access to it and to a vast amount of public land all around. We'll celebrate the expansion of the John Muir National Historic Site with the recent addition of West Hills Farm. West Hills was purchased for the park by the John Muir Land Trust to protect a valuable watershed for nearby neighborhoods and habitats for many plants and animals, and to provide new recreational opportunities for each and every one of us. We'll also celebrate the purchase by the Land Trust of Almond Ranch, right next to the Muir Historic Site, and now open for the very first time as the premier gateway to thousands of acres of public open space. We'll learn about John Muir's life here, his inspiring legacy of conservation, and his complicated attitudes about race. And we'll be inspired by Muir's great-grandson to continue protecting nature and making it accessible to all the people. Well, we have all of that and a whole lot more in the next hour. And along the way, you'll be hearing from quite a few people who've supported the expansion of this National Historic Site of ours and the goal of making it increasingly accessible to all of us. Now, some you're likely to know, and others you may be meeting for the very first time.
I'm sorry I can't be with you to celebrate together, but I'm really happy to say a few words as we dedicate the expansion of Muir National Park and Almond Ranch. First, let me congratulate the John Muir Land Trust and National Park Service. This expansion will add 44 acres to the existing 333-acre John Muir National Historic Site. It will protect these lands for generations to come, and that's important. And the opening of the Almond Ranch will protect an additional 281 acres of habitat for wildlife, while opening this former cattle ranch to hikers, bird watchers, and nature lovers of all sorts for the first time. I've long supported the protection of our natural beauty in California. I remember when I first arrived in the Senate and we passed the California Desert Protection Act, establishing Death Valley National Park, Joshua Tree National Park, and the Mojave National Preserve. Anyone who hasn't visited the California desert can't understand how strongly we feel for its beauty and unparalleled majesty, and I hope you agree. It takes a lot of hard work to conserve our lands for future generations. And so I want to applaud the John Muir Land Trust for fighting for this expansion and for Almond Ranch. These 2 acquisitions will connect visitors to an expansive trail system and, believe it or not, 18,000 acres of permanently protected land. That's an impressive feat by any measure. Again, congratulations on a job well done. I hope to see the fruits of your labor in person very soon. Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, it's Governor Gavin Newsom, and let me join the chorus of voices of gratitude to the John Muir Trust, to the National Park Service, to Senator Harris and the Congressman DeSaulnier for all of their hard work, your hard work, individuals, volunteers, all the people, foundations, donors that made this Almond Ranch announcement possible. Thank you for not just caring about yourselves, but caring about future generations. Thank you for meeting this moment head on as a state is heating up, our state's choking up and burning up as of late. Issues and the ravages of climate change are self-evident to anyone. The importance, the imperatives of not only talking about climate change in the context of CO2 emissions, but talk about the climate in terms of our biodiversity, and talk about the climate in terms of our natural landscapes and the natural beauty, the natural wonders that are so abundant here in the state of California, for that matter, throughout our national parks system. I think it was Pericles who said to the Athenians, "We do not imitate, for we are a model to others." And I say that to make this point. Thank you to the National Park Service for being a model to other nations, for all of your stewardship, for your faith and devotion to the cause that unites each and every one of us today. And that's the generational cause, a sustainable, not just situational mindset, and being there for the footsteps of the unborn. Thank you all, and congratulations.
The reason I like nature is because the fresh air and how you can learn new things, and I like how the birds chirp, and the trees are beautiful too.
Like the water coming on your feet, the trees, the beauty. I just love it. I feel in nature, I feel good and relaxed and calm and happy because I can run around or do whatever I want in nature.
Water sounds always makes me relaxed, and I just love nature.
I love nature because of the wildlife and how I can learn from it. Because I can find ladybugs and I can find pretty flowers and I can find pollen for the bees.
Hi, my name is Oliver.
And hi, my name is Ava. When I'm in nature, I feel really calm and centered.
When I'm in nature, I feel curious.
We all have to do our part to keep nature safe and healthy. We love nature. Bye!
Well, we are shooting this during the midst of the pandemic, and I have with me Tom Leatherman, superintendent of this National Historic Site and 3 other national park locations in the East Bay, and we are standing physically distant. We have our masks with us to put on in case we are close to each other outdoors, and certainly if we were to go indoors. And Tom, during the pandemic, what's here for the people to see?
Well, since the beginning of the pandemic, the Mount Wanda portion of the park has been open for visitation, and it remains that way. The orchards and the picnic area have been open since June, and we have limited tours of the house, but please do check the website before you come because things change and you want to make sure that you know what you're going to see when you get here.
The celebration now that we are featuring in this special program, how big, how important is that to the National Park Service?
Well, it's a great opportunity to share the legacy of John Muir, the land that he lived on, and come see additional open space, the wildlife, the plants, and just get out and enjoy it.
Well, we are now going to take a tour of this National Historic Site, see where he lived, see his orchard, see where he worked, learn about the family that he raised here with his wife Louie, and what this place meant to John Muir. And we'll also be exploring some of John Muir's inspirational legacy and some aspects that concern us.
I think that understanding that this was Muir's home is important for folks to realize that Muir was not just a naturalist and he was not just a writer. He was not just an advocate for national parks. He was a father and he was a husband, and those were very important roles for him.
John Muir, born in Scotland in 1838 and raised in Wisconsin, found his way to Northern California in 1868. A few years later, Muir befriended Dr. John Strentzel, his wife Louisiana, and their daughter Louie. The Strenzels owned a large fruit farm near the East Bay community of Martinez. By 1880, the friendship had blossomed into marriage, and before long, John and Louie were themselves managing the farm quite successfully. By 1890, they moved with their 2 young daughters, Wanda and Helen, into a Victorian home atop a knoll above the orchards. Muir played active roles in the life of his family and the building of their farming enterprise. But he was also able to pursue his passions, to explore far and wide and protect the natural world, with full support from Louie, Wanda, and Helen.
Muir had a good amount of economic stability, largely because of his wife's place in society and the successful ranching operation that they built together. I would put forth that Muir would not have had the ability to become the naturalist and the traveler and the writer and the preservationist that he was without that familial support from his wife and from his daughters, and from their ability to keep things running here at the home ranch in order for him to be able to live out his dreams and become the legend that he became.
Today, we can learn quite a bit about the life and legacy of Muir by visiting the John Muir National Historic Site, straddling Highway 4 in Martinez. I've come here often over the years, and this time was guided by Kelly English, Chief of Interpretation at the Muir Historic Site, and 3 other National Park units in the East Bay. We strolled through the historic orchards and past a large adobe that once served as headquarters for Muir's farming operation, and then entered the Muir's home, originally built by and for the Strensels. Its ornate architecture reflects more of their taste than Muir's, but he did add this touch: a rustic fireplace.
And it reminded him of being able to sit around a campfire out in Yosemite or up in Alaska. So he lived there, and he definitely enjoyed and took advantage of the space. And in fact, one of the rooms upstairs is the best known room of the house. It's what we call the Scribble Den. It was his study, and that's where he did a lot of his writing and compilations of his journals. Obviously, Muir kept journals throughout all of his travels, but he would come back from his travels and spend time in that room. That's where a lot of the writing and the and revising and editing occurred of some of his most famous published works.
Many of Muir's writings were profoundly influential in promoting conservation and establishing national parks in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But he was most alive outdoors in the presence of nature, and he found a lot of life and nature to enjoy right here on land high above his home, some of it his own property, and now part of the National Historic Site that bears his name. Muir named 2 hilltops here for his beloved daughters.
Mount Wanda and Mount Helen together, that's a piece of land that's over 300 acres up in the hills. It seems to be growing now, thanks to some really wonderful people who've worked very hard to make that happen. He, in fact, used it as a bit of an escape, like an oasis a little bit. And so he used to, when he got tired of writing in his study, he would take his daughters and go hiking up on Mount Wanda. It was his way of still getting in some of those hikes and saunters, even while he was away from his beloved Sierras and other areas. So today, people can now still hike up into Mount Wanda. We're actually in the process of completing some plans for expanding trail access on Mount Wanda in a few different areas. And that's very exciting because we'd love for more folks to be able to access Mount Wanda from a number of different directions and enjoy those trails as Muir and his daughters once did.
John Muir was devoted to his family and the preservation of the natural world. And so it's fitting that after he passed away on Christmas Eve 1914 at the age of 76, he would be buried next to Louis and others in this quiet sanctuary of nature on the family's property.
So they picked out that piece of property and they chose it very specifically. It was near a stream, it was shaded, it was peaceful, it was contemplative, and it was really a place where they really wanted to be able to go to remember their loved ones. And so, again, it was the last piece of property that the family held on to before they finally more or less gave it over to the National Park Service.
Visits to this National Historic Site can lead to many discoveries about John Muir, and also to many questions, some of them troubling. Kelly English and the National Park Service are committed to understanding and communicating John Muir's full story, including what he believed about race and how those beliefs might have influenced the creation of the early conservation movement and the establishment of our national park system. I asked Kelly to reflect on this complicated aspect of Muir's legacy and its importance today to all of us.
And certainly, he has been lauded for many, many years for all of the amazing things that he accomplished in terms of preservation and advocating for national parks and starting the Sierra Club and all these other amazing things. However, you have to also remember the time that John Muir lived in and the fact that it was, in terms of race relations in this country, it was one of the most fraught times, including the Civil War and the years after the Civil War and into the 20th century. You know, the headlines that have been made lately about, you know, John Muir being a racist, I think that in some ways it's not the right question to ask, because Muir did write some things that revealed that he used some of the racial terminology of the time that was less than flattering, shall we say, for African Americans and for Native Americans in particular. And we have no reason to believe that Muir didn't think these things, because most white men, I should say, of his place in society did think that way. But I also think the better direction to take this conversation is really more along the lines of, what does it mean that the conservation movement, and in fact the national park system, was created around that same time? What does it mean for these beloved institutions of ours that the men that shaped them had these kinds of views? I think that's a very, very interesting question indeed. And I think especially given the fact that the environmental movement in general and the conservation movement in particular, conservation organizations are not known for their diversity. And national parks are still wrestling with the issues of trying to attract a completely diverse audience that reflects the many faces of America, and also to have a diversity of staff. I think that rather than trying to defend Muir, or vilify Muir for that matter, we should just really take a step back and say, what does this mean for the big picture, for the conservation movement and for national parks? And how can we move forward to make both of those entities work for all Americans today? The same way that I love this country despite all of its flaws and all of the terrible history that impacted my ancestors and my parents even, I can still love John Muir's writings and appreciate him as a person, but acknowledge that there were some areas that he certainly could have improved upon. And in certain ways he did through his lifetime. He evolved in terms of his perspective on Native Americans throughout his life. He didn't write enough about African Americans later on in life for us to know if he evolved his way of thinking about African Americans at all or not. You can think that John Muir was a great conservationist and also appreciate that John Muir was not a progressive when it came to racial issues at the time. And those two perspectives are not contradictory, and they're imminently reconcilable.
Tom, what is the Park Service's goal in telling the full story of John Muir?
Well, when people come to visit the John Muir site, I think they're coming and they think they're going to see this story about John Muir who was a conservationist. And I think what we hope that people come away with is an understanding that he was more complex than that. He was a farmer, he was a rancher, he was a family man, he was a father, he was a husband. And there's some other things that we found out about John Muir that we aren't so proud of, and we need to learn about those things as well. And there are lots of sites in the National Park Service that tell some of those stories that we're not necessarily proud of, places like Manzanar. But I think if we don't understand that history, if we don't take the opportunity learning really the complete history, then we've lost something as a legacy that's part of the National Park Service. And so understanding those individual stories and the complexity of those stories is an important part of why the National Park Service is here, sharing that information and the history that happened, all the history.
And so those of us who come can learn all of it, can embrace our full history, even the tough parts of it, and perhaps take lessons learned and grow from them. So we can be inspired by John Muir's commitment to protecting nature, but in our time we can be inspired by making it accessible to all the people, for all the people, not just a few, but for everybody.
Exactly.
One possible takeaway. Well, one of your principal partners, and certainly this big celebration, is the John Muir Land Trust. And they are out there now working very hard and have been for about 30 years, protecting nature, but also making it accessible to each and every one of us. So let's take a look at the work of the John Muir Land Trust.
These are just a few of the many diverse landscapes protected by the John Muir Land Trust over the past 31 years in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. More than 3,500 acres of precious and vulnerable natural environments have been saved from suburbanization by the Land Trust in close collaboration with many public, private, and nonprofit partners, and with the enthusiastic support of thousands upon thousands of individuals generously contributing their time and money to preserving nature nearby for the health and well-being of every community and all the people.
And we're proud, I think most proud of that, this gathering community around the support and understanding of the necessity of these projects. And they're necessary not just from sort of a romantic perspective or the aesthetic of open space. They really provide the natural resource that sustains us as a community. It's a serious business of making sure that we preserve properties that will never be used up so that future generations can thrive.
These lovely and ecologically rich lands, now protected in perpetuity, allow nature to flourish and help provide us clean air, clean water, and free outdoor recreational opportunities we need as our large population continues to grow. But the John Muir Land Trust and all its partners can't and won't rest on their laurels. There's much more work to do and more environments yet to save, and in some cases, restore. Well, that's what's in the works here, along the shore of the Carquinez Strait, just east of John Muir's historic home. These 232 blighted acres of abandoned industrial land have been purchased by the Land Trust, and money is being raised to transform it soon into a flourishing haven for nature and sanctuary for us, and to buffer the shoreline against the rising tides of our changing climate.
This is the one I jump up and down about, along with so many others. It's really a fantastic project. Pacheco Marsh, right along Walnut Creek Channel, has this promise of delivering in its restoration a fully functional saltwater marsh to address climate change, and it also provides for all of the creatures that call this place home and will be calling this place home. It will be a world-class birding site. It already has 10 special status and endangered species identified here. They will come in droves when this is back to its natural state, and also to deliver public access. We'll be creating a whole system of boardwalks and raised platforms and so forth. And we're out at the far north reach of the property right now, and probably seeing the north face of Mount Diablo in the distance and so forth. As you look across that expanse, all of that will become saltwater marsh, with people being able to come along those walkways, view wildlife, to experience that beauty and that open space. And when they get out to shoreline, to be able to launch a kayak or come in, put in from the water trail and so forth, or be up in Walnut Creek Channel and experience that. It's just, the promise of it is extraordinary. This is a $24.5 million project. We're essentially 70% of the way there. So we're closing the gap on that. And when we get that done, we expect that we're going to be able to have this restored by 2022 or thereabouts, and have people come in and have that experience. We think, importantly, it's going to be an environmental education destination for kids from surrounding neighborhoods that otherwise have no shoreline access within 10 miles either direction, Bay Point all the way to Martinez. This will be the place that they can come to the shore with family, with children, from schools, environmental education in that regard, but also from throughout the region. The promise of being able to have kids better understand the bay, saltwater marsh dynamics, all the wildlife, and where they live really happens here.
For more than 3 decades, with strong and growing public support, the Land Trust that bears his name has successfully pursued John Muir's vision of investing in the protection and careful stewardship of the natural world as an essential public good. But now, not just for some of the people, but for all the people, and for all time. And the work of the Trust has only begun.
How do we provide public benefit? That's what we are as an organization. Public benefit organization. It's core to our mission, and the public is everyone.
Oh, the John Muir Land Trust has lots of new projects underway in Contra Costa and Alameda counties, including Pacheco Marsh. But Linus, in many ways, the Land Trust began its work more than 30 years ago, right here, near John Muir's home and around his property. Describe that.
It's true, Doug. The conservation ethos of John Muir is very much in the DNA of John Muir Land Trust. More than 30 years ago, the founders of the organization got together to permanently protect elements of Alhambra Valley, which include along the Franklin Ridge, Mount Wanda. So in the early 90s, they got together, they raised the funds to be able to purchase that property, convey it to the National Park Service, and there it is, permanently protected for all of us as a National Park historic site named for John Muir.
And it's so spectacular right
It
there.
is.
It is so beautiful. And now you've purchased, and we're celebrating here now, the purchase of West Hills Farm and Almond Ranch. And why is that so important and worth this big celebration?
It's really true, Doug. The work continues. It's very much worth it and important to continue to protect those properties, the southern swale of Mount Wanda, but even more connectively, Almond Ranch, connecting 18,000 acres of permanently protected open space to the National Park site, including the Bay Area Ridge Trail connections to Briones, the Carquinez Scenic Loop Trail, just endless amounts of public recreation and wildlife habitat.
Wonderful for all of that. West Hills Farm is gorgeous. Almond Ranch is gorgeous. We get to go see them now. The gates are open, at least Almond Ranch, and off on the trails. Linus, I think let's go look at the land itself and meet just a few of your partners.
Let's do it, Doug. If you need a big hit of nature, this is the place to come. It's close by, it's easy to access. Once you're out here, it's just refuge property and world-class views, and it's just beautiful.
The John Muir National Historic Site is the gateway to a big hit of nature, now getting quite a bit bigger and more ecologically rich with the addition of West Hills Farm on its southern side and the grand opening of Almond Ranch on the historic site's western flank, providing access from there to 18,000 acres of protected public lands beyond, on many miles of public trails. As I've had the pleasure in past years, we're all invited to follow in Muir's footsteps over gorgeous terrain little changed since his time and begin to make new discoveries on these new properties.
West Hills Farm is a place that is named for Muir, walking with his daughters. As he said, I'm going to go for a saunter or hike with the babies in the West Hills.
This is for everybody. This is for everybody. We're hoping to develop a wide variety of different types of trails. So there will be accessible trails down near where the creek restoration will be. There will be, much of which may be on boardwalk in some cases. There'll be some shaded trails, and then there'll be trails that get up into the hills like this. And so I think that for us, providing a variety of ways so that even if you can't walk all the way up here, you'll be able to experience other aspects of Mount Wanda.
In addition to offering new public access opportunities in the years ahead, West Hills Farm will also allow the National Park Service to preserve and care for an entire watershed, providing clean water flowing down from Mount Wanda to the communities below, and protecting sensitive habitats for a wide range of native plants and animals, including the threatened Alameda whipsnake and vulnerable California red-legged frogs and western pond turtles.
I absolutely think that what we will do with this property falls exactly in line with Muir's values and the principles that he not only held, but helped to impart to countless generations of environmentalists. And so I think he's pleased somewhere.
As Muir said, everybody needs beauty as well as bread to really have that fulfillment when he's talking about being in nature. And that's the wonder and beauty of a national park, is that his experience on the property, the West Hills Farm, and then by extension Almond Ranch, is something that becomes available to everybody.
The other major achievement we're celebrating is the purchase by the John Muir Land Trust of the 281-acre Almond Ranch, right next to the National Historic Site, and its grand opening to the public. As I saw in a behind-the-scenes visit here 2 years ago, a locked gate long separated the two properties. But now that gate is gone, and always will be, and each of us is free to wander through this lovely ranch Muir knew well, and on to points west, north, and south across vast and growing expanses of public lands linked by a growing network of public trails.
Almond Ranch will be a relatively short stretch, 1.5 miles of ridge trail, but it will connect so much more than that. It's a big vision, very exciting.
The Bay Area Ridge Trail will eventually be 550 miles long and entirely circumnavigate the Bay Area on ridge lines and it's around 70% complete. With this section of the Ridge Trail now open from the National Historic Site to Almond Ranch, we're able to follow dozens of miles of contiguous and connected pathways from here, including a 50-mile loop around Carquinez Strait.
So bringing together this particular stretch of trail, it really required a partnership, as each and every inch of the Ridge Trail does. So it was John Muir Land Trust, East Bay Regional Park District, the National Park Service, all the stakeholders, everyone coming together to do the hard work, to do the planning, to raise the money, to get the public support, and to make it all happen and bring it to fruition. A true partnership.
One of the principal partners in this successful initiative is the East Bay Regional Park District. It contributed $1 million of the $4 million raised to purchase Almond Ranch from funds made available when voters in Contra Costa and Alameda counties approved Measure WW by an overwhelming margin in 2008.
The acquisition of Almond Ranch by John Muir Land Trust with the East Bay Park District's assistance was all about protection and connections. It's a central part of the overall puzzle that's being pieced together to create a vast wilderness surrounded by these communities. It will be a great success for organizations like the Park District and the John Muir Land Trust if 20 or 30 years from now, Doug, you and I could be standing here and still make a 360-degree glance to the south, the west, and the north, and most of the east, and see wilderness. Knowing that there are all these people living nearby that can share in its enjoyment. That would be a real success.
The hoped-for vision would be for people to understand Muir's conservation ethos of preserving very important places with respect to natural resource as something in balance to what people need, what all local residents need, including wildlife and so forth, and to accommodate everybody. Again, everybody needs beauty as well as bread.
Well, the expansion of the national park site by the addition of West Hills Farm is something that actually took many other partners and many years to accomplish. It's not a simple process. You can't just, Linus, buy some land, give it to the national park, put a bow on it and walk away. This took an act of Congress and a signature of the president. Sort of describe that and who was involved.
You're exactly right. We wish we could have just purchased, as you say, put a bow on it and say, here you go, because it was definitely something that NPS wanted to achieve. They wanted the property, West Hills Farm, so we first confirmed that. And then we worked with the owner to purchase, to ultimately permanently protect the property, but our ultimate goal was to convey it to the National Park Service, which requires, as you say, an act of Congress. So, of course, we went to our local representatives, George Miller at the time.
Representative George Miller, we'll see him a little bit later on.
Oh, excellent. I mean, George was such a longtime proponent and supporter for John Muir Land Trust. Can't get half of what we've done without him. That said, he brought it to the House of Representatives, was able to achieve that vote, but it died in the Senate. So as George termed out, next iteration was Marc DeSaulnier, his successor. We went to Marc, and as his first act of Congress, he brought it before the House, it passed, carried in the Senate by Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris, couldn't get it through. Who do we go to again?
One more time.
Right, back to Marc. Marc carries it again through the House of Representatives. Kamala Harris carries it in the Senate with a unanimous vote. It's signed by the president, and off we go. We're able to convey it.
An amazing achievement, a bipartisan success. You know, I had a wonderful Zoom conversation with Congressman DeSaulnier and also Congressman Mike Thompson, who supports the bill, of course, and they're great champions of the environment and public access to all. Let's hear what they have to say about all this.
Oh, great.
Positive things happen every day in life and in, I know it's hard for people to believe, but in Congress. But this is particularly a wonderful thing to celebrate for me. So I'm just very thankful.
Why is it so important to protect nature, and why is it so important for all of us to have easy and free access to it?
So I think the famous letter that Chief Seattle sent to the President of the United States, where he said, the earth doesn't belong to us humans. We belong to it. And I think that's important to remember. We need to remember this is where we come from. We come from nature, and it's genetic, but it's a deeply spiritual place. I mean, when you read about the history of Native Americans in this country in particular, and their connection, and people like Emerson and Thoreau and Muir. So all of these collaborations that lead us back out into nature are a very important part of our legacy for you, for me, for everyone, for future generations to be able to get out there and get into nature, as Muir would say, is a wonderful legacy to be part of.
What's your hope for the future?
So in 50 years from now, I hope that we've come to grips with climate change as the most important existential threat to this planet and our species, but we continue to have this rich legacy of multiple generations being good stewards in the Bay Area, in the East Bay, and in Contra Costa.
But how would you seek to inspire us in the roles we need to play in these months, years, and decades ahead?
What I would say to people is people have fought and died for American democracy, including our stewardship of the earth. You have to be engaged. You can't take it for granted. All of us have to fight for it. You don't have to be a member of Congress. You can be involved with the John Muir Land Trust. Pick a subject that you feel engaged about personally and become engaged in it. Donate your time. And that's ultimately the biggest legacy we can leave.
It's good to get a win every once in a while. And this is a big win. This is something that we can all be happy about and we can all celebrate. And probably now, as much, if not more than ever, we need opportunities for people to be able to get outside, to recreate, to enjoy and soak in the splendor of our natural resources.
Why is this kind of land conservation, celebration of the protection of nature and the health of our communities so important right now?
We're in the midst of this incredibly treacherous fire season, and it's most certainly influenced heavily by climate change. And we're on the West Coast, we're burning up, and on the East Coast, they're facing hurricanes, and some of the worst hurricanes that we've ever seen. Again, influenced by climate change. So we need to do all that we can to protect our natural areas and to reduce our footprint so we can deal with some of these climate change issues. So I would hope people come away from this doubling down on their commitment to protect and enhance our natural beauties and an understanding of the importance of recognizing and dealing with climate change that's impacting our lives so much.
Well, Linus, you've had tremendous political support at the national level, but also here at the state, county, local levels as well. Political leaders who've really gotten behind this. Why has that been important?
It's so important. Land conservation is all about partnering, and it's all about bringing public benefit. What are the lands that we need to preserve to address the most constituents that all of us represent? As a public benefit corporation, as elected officials, address their constituents within whatever district they're representing. And the Land Trust is very regional. So we cross over into all those districts and working with those elected officials to make sure we're addressing what all of us want to achieve for local citizens, public benefit, public recreation. Couldn't do it without them. It's been a wonderful relationship, and I know there's much more to come.
Well, I had a chance to have two more lovely Zoom conversations with two of these elected political leaders, and let's take a listen, hear what they had to say.
Fantastic.
One of the big partners in this, of course, is the John Muir Land Trust, who has just done such great work in the area over the years. It's been absolutely instrumental in making this purchase happen. And I think it's important for people out there to know that their dollars are well spent when it comes to donating to the Land Trust, because it's so important that this land remain forever as part of the people's land, to complete trails like the Bay Area Ridge Trail, like the Carquinez Loop, and just for hiking, biking, and so many wonderful outdoor activities for people that live in the cities.
What's your call to action for all of us as citizens as well as everybody else?
We're not going to be able to continue this vision of for example, for the leaders of the John Muir, Land Trust. We're not going to be able to continue their vision without money. And I know that it always comes down to money. Doggone it, I wish it didn't.
Right.
But nevertheless, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have thousands of dollars, tens of dollars, 5, 10, 20, whatever everybody can afford. Let's face it, we've got a lot of people, 7, 8 million people in the Bay Area. If everybody gave $5, which is, you might spend, in less than a week or maybe even a day at Starbucks, you can protect more land. And this is what we all need to do, is to buy into this vision and to help where you can. Not everybody can help a lot, but everybody can help a little.
How important is it for the people you represent and young people, as you mentioned, to have immediate free access to nature nearby?
Oh, it's very important. I mean, when you look at our society now, it's so bogged down with traffic and congestion and all of those things. So the opportunity to just enjoy that nature, to really connect with nature, is just very important. I just really want to say to the John Muir Land Trust, I just appreciate them so much for the work that they do. I just want to thank those individuals that's been leading the charge for so long, for their work, for their persistence and their ability to work with leadership and people that are going to be making the type of policy decisions that keep our parks open, and to dedicate lands, and to keep up the good fight. And let's start being the trailblazers that's going to bring others along, because that's what's so important, is to make sure that the work never stops, and that the handoff is clear, and that that we're promoting this whole concept of our nature and our natural resources. And I think that's what's important. Thank you for the work that you've done, but let's continue to bring people along.
Linus, I have to say, I'm so impressed by the cavalcade of support that you've received from so many people, organizations, including government agencies and nonprofit leaders. Really quickly, why has all that been so important?
Cavalcade's a great description, actually, of partnering. We can't do it without partners, whether it's state, local, regional, nonprofit partners, agencies. They all make the difference to get these projects across the finish line.
Well, so many have been involved, but here are just a few more of those who are here to help celebrate.
Great.
In this extraordinary year, perhaps more than any other, we've all come to recognize something John Muir, the conservationist, recognized long ago: the critical importance of protecting nature and our precious open spaces. As an environmental attorney, I give a standing ovation to John Muir Land Trust's ongoing heroic efforts to preserve huge swaths of wildlife habitat and trail lands for future generations. Any plan to combat climate change must include land conservation to succeed. Your triumphant fight to save Almond Ranch from future development demonstrates a laser focus on clean air and water for our region. Dedicating West Hills Farms to the National Park Service is a crowning accomplishment, as the public can actually walk in John Muir's actual steps. I know I intend to take my kids there to breathe the fresh air and gain a lifelong appreciation for what this historic, beautiful spot means to Californians and our entire country. I commend John Muir Land Trust for these amazing victories against difficult odds in the most troublesome of times. I'm happy our community can look forward to a bright future.
Congratulations to John Muir Land Trust and to the National Park Service. The acquisition of the Almond Ranch and the expansion of the John Muir Historic Site is of major importance to the City of Martinez and in the entire Bay Area. The City of Martinez is proud to have played a part in this acquisition. We are also proud to be the home of John Muir, one of the nation's most iconic citizens and a major force in the establishment of America's best idea, the National Park Service.
2 of the $4 million required by the John Muir Land Trust to purchase Almond Ranch was provided by the State of California's Wildlife Conservation Board.
Just wanted to take a minute and say congratulations to the John Muir Land Trust and the National Park Service for completion of the Almond Ranch acquisition and subsequent dedication of that project to the National Park Service system. The Almond Ranch project was an easy project for the Wildlife Conservation Board to get behind and support. The project's rich biological diversity, coupled with the project's location from a habitat connectivity as well as a public recreational use opportunity in and around the Bay Area, made it an easy project for the board to consider and ultimately approve funding for the project. On behalf of staff and the board itself, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be a partner in this historic project. Thanks.
So on behalf of all of us, to all of you, congratulations. What a great way to celebrate. Thanks for celebrating. Expansion of the park, acquisition of Almond Ranch. It's a huge boon for wildlife. You've got Alameda whip snake that are threatened, California red-legged frog, mountain lions, bobcats, badgers, foxes, eagles, hawks. There is such connectivity for nature here, but there's also connectivity for people. And as people, when we look into the past, we learn lessons from those past and we manifest those lessons. We can make things better together for all of us. And that's what's happening today. So you've accomplished an increased access to nature for thousands of people, children, young, small, old, from the surrounding urban setting. And you've given them the opportunity for those people to go out and get reconnected to nature. That in turn is going to inspire future generations of champions for open space and ultimately for our planet. So thanks for everything you're doing. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great celebration.
And a special thanks is also due to the California State Coastal Conservancy for contributing half of the funds needed to acquire West Hills Farm.
The Coastal Conservancy has been working to preserve the Bay Area's greenbelt for over 20 years, and the John Muir Land Trust has been a fabulous partner in this work. Almond Ranch and West Hills Farm will protect critical habitat and provide its people a place to hike, ride their bikes, and get out into nature, something that we all particularly need these days. Congratulations to the John Muir Land Trust and the National Park Service on completing a project that truly benefits everyone and everything that calls the Bay Area home.
John Muir's words, passion, and vision were instrumental in inspiring in people across America, from school children to presidents, with determination to preserve spectacular open lands. With deep gratitude to our private and public partners, the John Muir Land Trust is proud to donate to the John Muir National Historic Site the West Hills farmland on which John Muir himself walked, and to open to the public the beautiful and critical Almond Ranch. Today, they become your heritage.
Well, thanks to the contributions of many individuals and organizations, we have a lot to celebrate out here. Linus, from the Land Trust point of view, what have you learned through all of this?
What we learn is that over and over again, we can't accomplish this work without community support, and to take a moment and say thank you for that to each individual donor, to our agency partners, to family foundations. It takes all of us together to actually set aside and permanently protect these thousands of acres. And it's more important now than ever, Doug, based on the stresses that are being put on our natural environment by climate change. We have lots of work to do, lots more support to ask for, but always with gratitude. We can get it done.
Stay engaged, stay involved for all of us. And Tom, public support is very important to the Park Service. What would you say about that?
Well, the National Park Service really lives because of the support that we get. And a site like John Muir National Historic Site wouldn't be here without the community advocating for setting it aside. Mount Wanda, West Hills Farm, they were all made possible by the local support. But it's not just a local story, it's a national story, it's nationally significant, and now we can all enjoy it because of the local support for making it happen.
So keep our eyes on the prize here, all of us, and roll up our sleeves because we got a lot more work ahead of us. You know, we have a lot more natural environment to protect, take care of, to steward, to make accessible to more and more people, and to deal with these big issues such as climate change. You know, nobody can inspire us more to act than Michael Muir. Michael is the great-grandson of John Muir, and he's taken his famous ancestors' legacy and is applying it now in new and very inspiring ways in the 21st century.
John Muir's legacy lives in the hearts of those inspired by his commitment to understanding and caring for the natural world and his successful efforts to preserve iconic environments and help give birth to our system of national parks. One of those inspired by John Muir's legacy is his great-grandson. Like his famous ancestor, Michael Muir loves the outdoors and is committed to connecting people to nature and hopes they fall in love with it too and work to protect it.
So I was raised with lots of John Muir lore, and it kind of opened some doors for me to live the life that I've lived.
Mike Muir found an early passion for horses, breeding and training them from a young age.
What makes me different than the typical horseman is I've lived with MS since I was 15. Over the course of 3 days, I went from normal to flat on my back in bed. For people in that situation, it's universal to be profoundly depressed and to think that, you know, your life is in many ways over. There are, you know, you think about all these things that you can't do. And what's gotten me through life and kept me with my horses is you don't worry about what you've lost. You have to focus on what you can still do.
And Mike Muir has done a lot. Despite his nearly lifelong physical challenges, Mike has continuously pursued his passions for horses and nature, and like his great-grandfather, has lived a life rich in extraordinary adventures. He's driven his custom-made horse-drawn carriages across Europe and the United States, in one case following the path of his great-grandfather's famous 1,000-mile walk from Indiana to the Gulf of Mexico, right after the Civil War.
I felt a kinship with him too, because what motivated him was a crippling injury that blinded him, an industrial accident. He despaired that he would never be able to do the things that he wanted to do, and over time, in a dark room, he recovered his vision. I think what he said was, "I will never turn my sight away from the glories of nature again." These things inspired me to do the things that I've done. And in a way, it was his disability that set him off on the life that he lived. And in a way, it's my disability that shaped my life too.
Crediting horses with allowing him to live an active and adventuresome life, Mike turned his attention to others who could benefit from horses as he has.
Over time, the race horses and the show horses went away, and I started to focus on the gift that my horses gave me to make the world a bigger place for somebody that has mobility challenges, that my horses compensate for my lost function. And then I realized that my mission needs to be to share this gift that my horses gave me.
Mike founded Access Adventure in 2005, an organization dedicated to making the world bigger and nature more accessible to more people. And he found the perfect home to fulfill his mission: historic Rush Ranch, a 2,000-acre property near Fairfield, owned by the Solano Land Trust.
I pitched it to the Land Trust, and they said, absolutely. And so they handed me the keys to the kingdom here, and I've been at this beautiful ranch for 15 years, and it's been a really wonderful partnership.
In the years since, Access Adventure has touched the lives and expanded the horizons for thousands of people, many of whom may never have had the chance to be actively exposed to the healing powers of horses and the natural world. When we visited in the midst of the pandemic, Rush Ranch and Access Adventure were not offering on-site programs, but Mike, his dedicated team of volunteers, and two magnificent Stonewall sport horses, bred and raised at the ranch, took us for a ride to feel the fresh breezes of Sassoon Marsh and taste a bit of the magic Access Adventure has to offer.
The Amazon isn't the only lungs of the earth, and the Amazon is disappearing. These lands are important too. This is a way that we're going to combat climate change that has profoundly affected me now. My home burned to the ground in the LNU fire that's still raging. It's still raging. and I lost my house. And it's these fires, you know, I believe with all my heart that these are the result of climate change. You know, California is burning because of climate change.
The devastating loss of his home in the historic fires of August and September 2020 is heartbreaking, but in no way is it deterring Michael Muir. He's not thinking about what he's lost. As always, he's focused on what he can still do, and he's fueled by the importance and urgency of Access Adventure's mission, and all of ours.
Our planet is in danger. If we don't change the way that we live, if we don't preserve what wild space is left to capture the carbon, to control global warming, you know, we're going to lose this jewel in space that we live on. And it circles back to, you can't get people to care about preserving something or saving something if they don't love it. And so the work of the Land Trust here and in the Bay Area and all over the world is to get people to value how we can't survive without nature.
The Muir family's long devotion to loving the natural world and helping others love and protect it too is at least as important today as it was a century ago. In fact, it's essential.
We're going to save this planet. It's going to be because we cared enough to preserve enough of it to support us, to carry the human race forward. It's that big of a deal. It is.
Oh, I've known Michael Muir for a long time, and I've always been inspired by his attitude and by his commitment to protecting nature and to giving the gift of nature to people who might otherwise never have the opportunity to experience it. And now I'm inspired by his commitment to battle climate change and his call to action for all of us to get involved. Well, that's an immense responsibility for my generation and for those who will follow in our footsteps. But thankfully, we have some young people who are ready to roll. Let's take a listen.
We can't undo the damage that has already been done to our environment, and my generation has to face the consequences. But we can decide how much more global warming occurs. Permanently protecting open spaces is an important part of this solution. Land conservation allows for our fragile wildlife and ecosystems to survive.
Human activity and urban development has led to a loss in native environments. It is up to my generation to preserve and restore these ecological niches so that we have a greater biodiversity. But to do this, we need to work together at a global scale to reduce our carbon footprint.
Make global warming a campaign issue. Let your elected officials know that you support them taking strong steps to cut greenhouse gases. Look into each candidate's platforms and see where they stand on issues of sustainability, climate change, energy efficiency, and land conservation. Your voice matters, so go vote.
Well, I am thrilled. I have with me right now three people I admire tremendously, veterans who have spent many decades working to preserve nature, protect parks and open space, make it accessible to each and every one of us here in the East Bay and far beyond in many ways. George Miller. George lives in Martinez and for 40 years represented this very district in Congress and was a true champion for the environment. George, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Right over here, we have two people that I know very well and like a lot. Tina Batt, standing close to her husband, Bob Doyle. Tina Batt is the former director of the Land Trust, among many, many other things, and was very involved in helping to kind of usher us to this very celebration we're having right now, as is her husband, Bob Doyle, the last 10 years, general manager of the East Bay Regional Park District and has spent his entire career in the Park District. So you all have loads to say. Thank you for all your great work. But let me just ask you about the future. Maybe start, George, for you. If you and all of us were to get together in 10 years, what do you hope you could say about parks, open space, conservation here?
I would say it's the greatest gift that we gave ourselves. These resources are open to everybody. They can share them, they can use them, And we should look back with pride that even in the time of the pandemic, we were able to expand East Bay Regional Parks so more people could take advantage of it, they could learn more history about it, and they could understand the history of the whole region. It's a great tool, and we should just honor it and make sure that we take care of it and that we work on the expansion of it for future generations. This generation got a huge education about the value, and that we want to capitalize on that.
That's right. During the pandemic, people rushed out of their parks or open spaces and made a huge difference in their lives, our lives. Tina, for you, what would you say if we were to get together in a decade and talk about what's been happening?
I'd like to see continued growth of the community's involvement in the conservation of their natural resources, the stewardship and environmental education, and that would involve kids. The Land Trust was formed because the community wanted a say in how these natural resources were going to be stewarded. And I think that needs to continue to grow across the country, across the world. Being involved locally makes a huge difference.
And it makes a huge difference, and it can be a lot of fun for those of us who get to be involved, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
and Bob, for you, what would you say? What would be your big picture hope?
Well, this is your land. We have to take care of it. We need a new commitment. We need a youth army, a climate army to take care of these places because there's so many challenges with climate. And so we have this land. We need to protect it. We need to be stewards of it, like John Muir would have said, but we need to give people jobs to take care of this land, to take care of our forests.
And so, we need with public policy and, to make our commitments for public lands and for open space. For us as individuals, what would be your very quick call to action for the future? George, what would you say?
Oh God, my call to action is really about preservation. I mean, it's about recognizing the value of these assets and making sure they're there for the next generation and the next generation and the next generation.
Excellent. And Tina, how about you? How would you add to that?
I think land conservation, land stewardship, land and water are the way to address climate impacts, and it's the way for the community to be directly involved in that service.
And Bob, last word?
We have the tools. We need to invest in these places. We need to give people jobs and training to work in them, and we can get this done.
Bob Doyle, Tina Batt, George Miller, three of my very favorite people. Thanks for all you've done, and thanks for this.
We all contribute to greenhouse gas emissions in nearly everything that we do.
But once we understand where the emissions come from, we can make choices to reduce them.
And everyone can be part of the solution.
Here are some places to start. Choose a fuel-efficient car and minimize driving.
Take advantage of local shopping, dining, and recreation options.
Walk or bike when you can.
Choose energy-efficient appliances.
Turn off appliances and lights when you're not using them.
Look to see where your energy provider gets your energy and advocate for them to move towards renewables.
Use sustainable products.
Buy recycled and recycle what you buy.
Purchase locally grown food and locally raised livestock. The more local the product, the less energy it takes to transport it.
Save energy by not overheating or overcooling your living space.
Build for energy efficiency.
And finally, support your local land trust.
Oh, 2020 has been a very tough year for so many of us, for our state and for our nation. And so it's been just wonderful to have something big to celebrate out here in this historic landscape. Tom Leatherman, people want to come out to this National Historic Site. What do you recommend?
Well, Mount Wanda is open 7 days a week. We have the orchards and the picnic areas that are open, limited home tours, but check our website because you never know when things are going to change and we want to make sure you have the current information.
Check that website. Linus Uckel, Almond Ranch, ready to go?
Almond Ranch is open. Come enjoy Mount Wanda and then just keep going. That gate is open. 18,000 acres of permanently protected open space with a trail system that just goes on forever. It's an extraordinary experience. Come and enjoy.
Come and enjoy. It's spectacular. Last questions I have for both of you. Tom, what are your hopes and dreams if we were to get together here in the next few years? Hopes and dreams for the future?
I hope that we have trails and staging areas on Mount Wanda so that people can access West Hills Farm and that they're actually coming out and enjoying and using this historic site and learning about the history that's here on the land.
It is worth every trip you can make out here, that's for sure. And Linus, how about you? Hopes and dreams for the years ahead?
Really similar to Tom. It's a deepening experience for our community, for people to become more and more involved. We've saved thousands of acres for them to enjoy, for them to think about stewarding into the future. So their engagement to see thousands more people out on that property and handing it off to future generations.
Well, thank you both, and thank all of you for watching. We hope you stay engaged or get engaged if you haven't been already. Together we can make a big difference in leaving this world in much better shape than we found it. In the meantime, we look forward to working with you and to seeing you out here enjoying these public spaces that belong to each and every one of us.
The National Park expansion and Almond Ranch dedication is made possible by the generous support of our partners and underwriters dedicated to protecting our natural and historic treasures in the Bay Area and beyond. Additional support is provided by these organizations and individuals who made the purchase of West Hills Farm and Almond Ranch possible.
The biggest reason why nature is one of my favorite things in the world is that it's such an escape from the stresses of daily life. I truly couldn't imagine a world without the beauty of nature.
I feel really refreshed and happy that I get to breathe fresh air, and I always find it really interesting how many trees there are.
Well, we have forests, beaches, mountains. We have so many different things.